Dr. Kim Day sat in his small medical station, drinking his third cup of coffee that night. The station floated quietly in space near the edge of human territory. Most nights were boring here. Just him, his medical equipment, and the endless stars outside his window. He was reading a medical journal when the communication system started making noise. At first, it sounded like normal space static, but then something different came through. It was a pattern, like someone was trying to send a message. Day put down his coffee and walked to the control panel. The signal was weak, but definitely there. He had never heard anything like it before. The pattern was too organized to be random. Noise. Someone or something was calling for help. He checked his computer. The signal was coming from a small moon about 2 hours away. According to his maps, nothing should be there. No human ships, no colonies, nothing at all. Day looked at his medical supplies. He had enough equipment to help maybe 10 people if they were hurt, but going to investigate would break station rules. He was supposed to stay at his post and only leave for emergencies involving human ships. The signal kept repeating. It sounded desperate now, like whoever was sending it was running out of time. Day walked to his window and looked out at the stars. He became a doctor to help people, not to sit alone in space doing nothing. He made his decision. Day started his small rescue ship and programmed it to follow the signal. As he flew away from the station, he sent a message back to headquarters. He told them he was investigating a possible emergency. He did not mention that the signal might not be from humans. The 2-hour journey felt much longer. The signal got stronger as he got closer to the moon. When he finally arrived, he could see something had crashed on the surface. Smoke was still rising from the wreckage. Day put on his spacesuit and gathered his medical kit. The crashed ship looked nothing like human technology. It was made of some kind of metal that seemed to change color in the light. Strange symbols covered the hull. As he got closer, he could see that part of the ship had been torn open. Inside, he heard something moving. His heart started beating faster. This was definitely not a human ship. Day climbed through the opening in the hull. Inside, the ship was dark except for a few lights that were still working. The air was different too. It smelled like flowers mixed with electricity. Then he saw her. A figure was lying on the floor, not moving much. At first glance, she looked almost human, but her skin had a blue tint, and there were lines running under her skin that glowed softly. She was clearly hurt and needed help immediately. Day knelt down beside her. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Her eyes were larger than human eyes and completely black. She tried to say something, but he could not understand the words. He could see she was bleeding from several wounds, the liquid coming from her. Kurt's was not red like human blood. It was clear with tiny sparkles in it like liquid starlight. Day knew he had to act fast. He did not know anything about her species or how to treat her injuries. But she was dying, and he was the only one who could help her. Day carefully moved closer to the injured alien. She was trapped under a piece of twisted metal from her ship. Her breathing was shallow and quick like a scared animal. He could see that her legs were pinned, and one of her arms was bent at a wrong angle. The most surprising thing about her was how human-like she appeared, yet completely different at the same time. Her face had the same basic structure as a human face, but her features were more delicate. Her skin was pale blue like the color of ice on a winter morning. What really caught his attention were the lines running under her skin that looked like tiny rivers of light. These glowing lines pulsed, slowly like a heartbeat. They were brighter near her chest and became dimmer as they spread out to her arms and legs. Day realized these must be her blood vessels, but instead of carrying red blood, they carried some kind of luminescent fluid. She tried to speak again, and this time Day listened more carefully. Her voice was soft and musical, but the words were completely foreign to him. She seemed to be asking for help, based on the desperate tone in her voice. Day set down his medical kit and examined the metal piece that had her trapped. It was heavier than it looked, but he managed to lift it enough for her to pull her legs free. She cried out in pain as she moved, and the light in her veins flickered like a candle in the wind. Now that she was free, Day could see her injuries more clearly. She had several deep cuts on her arms and torso. The clear, sparkling fluid was leaking from these wounds steadily. He had no idea if this was dangerous for her or how much she could lose before it became life-threatening. She looked up at him with those large, dark eyes. There was fear there, but also curiosity. She seemed as surprised to see him as he was to see her. She reached out with her good arm and touched his face gently, as if checking to make sure he was real. Then she spoke a single word that sounded like Velara. She pointed to herself and repeated it. Day understood she was telling him her name. Day, he said, pointing to himself. My name is Day. She tried to repeat his name, but it came out sounding different in her musical voice. Still, she seemed to understand that they were introducing themselves to each other. Velara tried to sit up, but the effort made her wounds bleed more. The light in her veins was getting dimmer, and Day worried that meant she was getting weaker. He gently pushed her back down and opened his medical kit. The problem was that all of his medical training was for humans. He had no idea how her body worked or what might help her. What if human medicine was poisonous to her species? What if trying to help her actually made things worse? But looking at her pale face and the dimming lights under her skin, Day knew he had to try something. She was dying, and doing nothing would definitely not help her. He pulled out his scanner and ran it over her body. The readings were completely different from anything he had ever seen. Her heart rate was much faster than a human's, and the scanner detected 2 separate circulatory systems instead of 1. Velara watched him work with growing trust in her eyes. Even though they could not understand each other's words, she seemed to realize that he was trying to save her life. Day stared at his scanner readings, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Velara had 2 hearts beating at different rhythms, and her blood pressure was dropping fast. The sparkling fluid leaking from her wounds was clearly her version of blood, and she was losing too much of it. He looked through his medical supplies, feeling helpless. Everything he had was designed for humans. The bandages, the medicines, the surgical tools, none of it was made for someone like her. But he had to try something, or watch her die right in front of him. First, he needed to stop the bleeding. Das pulled out his emergency clotting gel, the kind used on human wounds. He hesitated for a moment, then carefully applied small amounts to her cuts. To his surprise, it seemed to work. The gel mixed with her strange blood and began to seal the wounds. But the real problem was internal. His scanner showed fluid building up inside her chest cavity. With humans, this would mean internal bleeding, probably from damaged organs. If he was right, she would die within the hour, unless he did something drastic. Velara was getting weaker by the minute. The lights under her skin were barely visible now, and her breathing was becoming more labored. She looked at him with those dark eyes, and he could see she trusted him completely. That trust made him even more nervous. Day had performed emergency surgery before, but always on humans and always in proper medical facilities. Here he was, inside a crashed alien ship, about to operate on a species he knew nothing about. His hands shook as he prepared his instruments. He used his portable scanner to map out where her 2 hearts were located. They were positioned differently than a human heart, one higher and one lower in her chest. Both were beating irregularly, now struggling to pump her diminishing blood supply. The hardest part was not knowing how her nervous system worked. He had no anesthetic that he knew was safe for her. When he showed her the surgical tools, she seemed to understand what he needed to do. She nodded weakly and gripped a piece of metal from her ship, preparing for the pain. Day made a small incision between her 2 hearts, following the path his scanner suggested. The moment he opened her up, more of that glowing fluid spilled out. He worked quickly, using suction to clear the area so he could see what was happening inside. Her internal organs looked similar to human organs, but were arranged differently. He found the source of the bleeding, a tear in what looked like her version of a major artery. In humans, he would clamp it off and repair it, but he had no idea if the same technique would work for her. Velara made soft sounds of pain, but did not move. She kept her eyes fixed on his face as if watching him work gave her strength. Day tried to stay calm for her sake, even though his heart was racing. He carefully clamped the damaged vessel and began to repair it, using techniques he had learned for human surgery. Her blood was different. It seemed to heal itself faster than human blood. The edges of the tear began to come together on their own once he stopped the flow. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Day finished the surgery. He sealed the incision and stepped back, exhausted. Now all he could do was wait and see if his desperate gamble had worked. Slowly, the lights under Velara's skin began to glow brighter again. Her breathing became more steady, and both her hearts settled into stronger, more regular rhythms. Velara's eyes fluttered open 3 hours after the surgery. The first thing she did was look around the crashed ship, as if trying to remember where she was. Then her gaze fell on Dee, who was sitting nearby, monitoring her vital signs on his scanner. She tried to sit up quickly, but pain shot through her chest where he had operated. She gasped and lay back down, her hand moving to touch the bandages, covering her incision. The lights under her skin were much brighter now, pulsing with a steady, healthy rhythm. Day moved closer and gently checked her pulse. Her 2 hearts were beating strongly, and the scanner showed that her internal bleeding had stopped completely. She watched him work, her large dark eyes filled with confusion and something that looked like disbelief. She spoke in her musical language, and though Day could not understand the words, her tone was full of questions. She kept pointing at him, then at herself, then at the medical equipment scattered around them. It was clear she was trying to understand what had happened. Day pulled out his tablet and showed her pictures of human anatomy, then pointed to the surgical tools he had used. He tried to mime the operation, showing her how he had found the internal bleeding and repaired it. Velara watched with growing amazement. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a sound like wind chimes, mixed with flowing water, beautiful but completely alien. But there was no joy in it. Instead, she seemed to be laughing at some kind of joke that only she understood. She struggled to sit up again, more carefully this time. When she was upright, she looked directly at Dai and spoke in a serious tone. Although he could not understand her words, he could tell she was trying to explain something important. Velara pointed to herself and said what sounded like Althari. Then she made gestures that seemed to indicate her people were advanced, intelligent and powerful. She pointed to various parts of her crashed ship, touching panels that still glowed with alien technology. Then she pointed at Day and made different gestures. These seemed to suggest something small, primitive and simple. She was not being mean about it, more like she was stating facts that everyone should know. Dai began to understand. Her people, the Althari, thought humans were not very smart or advanced. They probably saw humans the way humans might see insects, alive but not really important or capable of complex thinking. Velara touched her chest where the surgery had been done, then looked at Day with what could only be described as shock. She seemed to be realizing that this primitive human had just saved her life using methods that her advanced people might not have been able to replicate in the same situation. She tried to stand up, but her legs were still weak. Day helped her, and she did not pull away from his touch. Instead, she studied his face carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. Velara reached into a pocket of her torn clothing and pulled out a small device. She activated it, and suddenly it began speaking in broken but understandable English. "This translation device," she said, her voice now coming through the machine in English words. "I did not think humans could think enough to use it." She paused, looking embarrassed by her own words. "But you saved me. You did surgery. My people, they think humans are, how do you say, not smart animals." Day felt a mix of emotions, hurt that an entire alien species saw humans as barely intelligent, but also proud that he had proven them wrong. "We are smarter than you think," he said simply. Velara nodded slowly, the lights under her skin pulsing brighter as if responding to her emotions. "Yes," she said, "I am beginning to see this." Over the next 2 days, Velara stayed in the crashed ship while she recovered from her surgery. Day had moved some of his medical equipment from his rescue ship to better monitor her condition. He also brought food and water, though he was not sure if human food would be safe for her. It turned out that Velara could eat some of the same foods humans ate, but she preferred things that were sweet or had a lot of water in them. She was fascinated by the simple nutrition bars from Day's emergency supplies, turning them over in her hands and examining them like they were precious artifacts. "Your people make food that lasts long time without spoiling," she said through her translation device. Very practical. My people, we make food fresh each day. If ship crashes, we have no food. Day watched her eat and noticed how she solved small problems. When her water container was hard to open with her injured arm, she figured out how to brace it against a piece of ship debris. When the translator device's battery was running low, she found a way to connect it to her ship's emergency power using parts from Day's medical kit. You are very good at fixing things, Day told her, making things work even when they are broken. Velara looked surprised by the compliment. This is normal thinking, yes? You do same thing. You fix me when I was broken. But Day could see that her problem-solving was actually quite advanced. She approached challenges the same way he did, by looking at what was available and figuring out creative solutions. It made him wonder why her people thought humans were not intelligent. On the second day, Velara was strong enough to walk around the ship. She showed Day some of the alien technology, explaining how it worked. Her ship's computer was still partially functional, and she used it to show him star maps and images of her home world. This planet is called Althari Prime, she said, pointing to a blue-green world on the screen. Very beautiful, very controlled. She touched the screen, and the image changed to show cities with tall crystalline buildings. Everything looked perfect and organized, like a piece of art rather than a place where people actually lived. My people, we have same thoughts about everything, Velara continued. We agree on all things. We do not argue or fight. We live in harmony. Day thought this sounded wonderful, but something in her voice suggested it was not as good as it seemed. But you left, he said. Why? Velara was quiet for a long moment. The lights under her skin dimmed, and she looked sad. I am scientist. I study other worlds, other peoples. I learn about species like yours, humans. I write reports about what I find. She pulled up more images on her computer. These showed various alien species, including some pictures of humans, working on space stations and planets. I tell my people that humans are intelligent, that you solve problems, create things, show kindness to strangers. But they do not want to hear this. Day was starting to understand. They wanted you to say humans were not smart. Yes, they want me to write that humans are simple animals, that Althari are superior to all other species. When I refuse to lie, in my reports they say I am contaminated. They say spending time studying other species has made me think wrong thoughts. Velara closed the star map and looked directly at Day. They want to fix my mind, make me think like all other Althari, so I take my research ship and run away. But ship is damaged, and I crash here. Day felt sorry for her. She had lost her home, and her people just for telling the truth about humans. I'm glad you crashed here, he said, and I'm glad you told the truth about us. On the third day, Day was checking Velara's healing progress when his scanner picked up something approaching fast. A large ship was coming toward the moon, much bigger than his small rescue vessel. The scanner showed technology unlike anything in human databases. Velara, Day said urgently. There's a ship coming. She looked at his scanner readings and her face went pale. The lights under her skin flickered rapidly like a warning signal. Althari ship, she whispered. They found me. Within minutes they could see the massive vessel through the crack in her crashed ship's hull. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, made of the same color-changing metal as Velara's ship, but 100 times larger. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship landed nearby with no sound at all. Day watched through his scanner as several figures in flowing robes emerged and walked toward them. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if they were all controlled by the same mind. They will want to take me back, Velara said, her voice shaking. You should hide. They will not like seeing you here with me. But before Day could move, the Althari were already at the entrance to the crashed ship. 3 of them entered, and Day got his first look at Velara's people. They were taller than humans and moved with an eerie grace. Like Velara, they had blue-tinted skin and glowing veins, but their lights pulsed in exactly the same pattern. Their faces showed no expression at all, not anger, not relief, not even curiosity about finding a human there. The lead Althari spoke to Velara in their musical language. Even without understanding the words, Day could tell the tone was cold. and disapproving. Velara responded, pointing to her bandages and then to Day. One of the other Althari stepped closer to examine Day. It studied him the way a scientist might look at an interesting bug, tilting its head from side to side. Then it spoke to the others, and all three of them made a sound that might have been disgust. "What are they saying?" Day asked. Velara's translation device crackled to life. "They say you have contaminated me. That being near a human has damaged my mind. They want to know why I allowed a primitive species to touch me." The lead Althari spoke again, this time more forcefully. "They say I must come with them immediately. That I need to be cleansed," Velara translated, her voice getting smaller. "Cleansed?" Day asked. "They will remove my memories of this time. Remove my memories of you saving me. Make me forget that humans can be intelligent and kind." One of the Althari produced a device that looked like a crystal wand. It pulsed with the same rhythm as their veins, and when Velara saw it, she took a step backward. "That is memory cleanser," she whispered. "It will make me think like all other Althari again." The Althari spoke to each other in rapid, musical tones. Day could not understand them, but their body language was clear. They were discussing him like he was a problem that needed to be solved. "They are deciding what to do about you," Velara said. "Some think they should just ignore you, like ignoring an animal. Others think you are dangerous because you have influenced me." Day felt angry. These beings had come to take away Velara and erase her memories, all because she had learned that humans were not the simple creatures they believed. "Tell them I won't let them hurt you," Day said. Velara looked at him with surprise. "You cannot stop them. They are much more advanced than humans." But when she translated his words, something unexpected happened. The three Althari actually stopped talking and looked at him with what might have been surprise. The lead Althari held up the crystal memory device and spoke to Velara in commanding tones. The lights under all three aliens' skin pulsed in the same pattern, like they were sharing thoughts without words. Velara listened to them, but her own lights were flickering differently, more rapidly, and in a pattern that looked almost angry. "They say the cleansing will be quick and painless," she translated for Day. "They say I will be grateful afterward to have my correct thoughts restored." The second Althari moved closer to Velara and extended the crystal device toward her head. She took a step back, bumping into Day. "I do not want to forget," she said loudly in their language, then repeated it in English through her translator. "I do not want to forget what this human did for me." The three Althari exchanged glances. Clearly they had not expected her to refuse. The lead one spoke again, and this time his voice carried a tone of authority that made even Day feel nervous. "He says I do not have a choice," Velara translated. "He says my mind has been damaged by contact with lower species. He says I cannot think clearly anymore." Day watched as the three aliens began to circle around Velara. They moved with the same eerie coordination, like they were performing a ritual they had done many times before. Velara looked scared, but she also looked determined. "No," she said firmly in their language. The word sounded the same in Althari as it did in English. The lead Althari paused, clearly shocked. He spoke rapidly to the other two, and their lights began pulsing faster. "They say no Althari has ever refused cleansing before," Velara explained. "They do not understand why I am acting this way." One of the other Althari pointed at Day and spoke in an angry tone. "They blame you," Velara said. "They think you have somehow poisoned my mind." Day felt frustrated. These beings could not accept that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong about humans. Instead, they had to believe that he had somehow damaged Velara just by helping her. "Tell them I saved your life," Day said. "Tell them their advanced technology could not help you, but simple human medicine did." When Velara translated this, the three Althari became visibly agitated. Their lights pulsed in chaotic patterns, and they spoke to each other in harsh, rapid tones. "They say this is impossible," Velara said. "They say humans are too primitive to understand advanced Althari biology." "But I did understand it," Day replied. "I figured it out by watching and learning. That's what humans do, we adapt." The lead Althari stepped forward with the crystal device again. This time, two of them moved to grab Velara's arms. She struggled against them, but they were stronger than she was. "Wait," she shouted. Please let me say goodbye to the human who saved me." The Althari looked confused by this request, but they allowed her to approach Day. She moved close to him and spoke quietly in English. "They will erase my memories, but they cannot erase what I learned about your species," she whispered. "Humans are not what my people think." As she spoke, she pressed something small and hard into Day's hand. It felt warm and seemed to pulse, with its own inner light. "Hide this," she whispered. "Do not let them see it. It contains my research about humans, the real truth about your species." Day quickly slipped the object into his pocket, just as the Althari pulled Velara away from him. "Thank you," she called out as they dragged her toward their ship. "Thank you for showing me that intelligence comes in many forms." The crystal device glowed brighter as they held it near her head. Velara looked back at Day one last time, and he could see tears in her large dark eyes. "Remember me," she said, just before the device activated, and her expression went blank. 3 weeks after the Althari ship had taken Velara away, Day was back at his medical station, trying to return to normal life. But normal felt different now. Every time he looked out at the stars, he thought about her blank expression as they erased her memories. He wondered if she even remembered that humans existed. The small crystal device she had given him sat on his desk, looking like nothing, more than a pretty paperweight. It was about the size of his thumb, clear like glass but with tiny lights that moved inside it like living sparks. Sometimes at night he would hold it and wonder what secrets it contained. Day had tried connecting it to his computer several times, but nothing happened. Human technology apparently could not read whatever information was stored inside. He had almost given up on ever accessing it when something unexpected occurred. He was treating a minor injury on his own hand, a cut from a sharp piece of metal, when a drop of his blood fell onto the crystal device. The moment his blood touched, the entire crystal lit up like a miniature star. The lights inside began moving faster, forming patterns that looked almost like writing. His computer screen suddenly filled with information. At first it was all in Althari symbols that he could not read, but then slowly the text began changing into English. The device was somehow learning from his computer and translating itself. What Day saw on his screen made him sit down hard, in his chair. The crystal contained Velara's complete research files about human biology, but it was much more than just scientific notes. It was an entire medical database that showed how human and Althari biology were related. According to her research, humans and Althari had evolved from similar origins millions of years ago. The same basic principles that worked for Althari medicine could be adapted for humans, but made much more effective. The crystal contained detailed instructions for treatments that could heal injuries in hours instead of weeks. Day spent the next several days reading through the files. There were cures for diseases that human doctors had been fighting for centuries. There were techniques for repairing damaged organs without surgery. There were even methods for helping the human body heal itself using its own natural processes. But the most amazing discovery was a section about human potential. Velara had studied human settlements across the galaxy and documented things that even humans did not know about themselves. She had found that humans could adapt to environments that would kill most other species. She had recorded cases of humans surviving impossible situations through sheer determination and creativity. Her files contained detailed analysis of human problem-solving abilities. She had documented how humans could look at complex problems and find simple solutions that more advanced species missed. According to her research, this was not a weakness. It was actually a form of intelligence that most species had lost as they became more technologically advanced. Dai realized he was looking at proof that humans were not the primitive species the Althari believed them to be. Velara had spent years collecting evidence that humans were uniquely gifted in ways that her people could not understand. The medical applications alone would change everything. Day could use this knowledge to save lives, to heal injuries that were currently impossible to treat. But it was more than that. This was proof that humans deserved respect from other intelligent species. He thought about Velara, somewhere in Althari space, with no memory of the research she had dedicated her life to. She had given up everything to learn the truth about humans, and now that truth was sitting in his hands. Day made a decision. He would not keep this knowledge to himself. He would share it with human medical researchers, with scientists, with anyone who could use it to help people. Velara's research would not be forgotten, even if she could no longer remember creating it. The crystal pulsed brighter, as if it approved of his decision. 6 months after discovering the crystal's contents, Day was no longer working alone at a remote medical station. He had been transferred to the main human medical research facility on Earth, where teams of scientists were studying Velara's data around the clock. The changes were happening faster than anyone had expected. The first breakthrough came when doctors used Althari healing techniques to repair a damaged heart in just 3 hours, instead of the usual weeks of recovery. The patient walked out of the hospital the same day, completely healed. Word spread quickly through the human colonies. Hospitals began requesting the new treatment protocols. Diseases that had killed thousands of people every year were suddenly curable with simple procedures that took minutes to perform. The crystal device had become the most important medical discovery in human history. Day found himself at the center of it all, working with the best doctors and scientists humanity had to offer. But he never forgot that none of this would have been possible without Velara's sacrifice. Every time he used her techniques to save a life, he thought about the alien scientist who had given up her own memories to help a species her people considered primitive. Then, one morning, something unexpected happened. Day was in his lab when the crystal device suddenly activated on its own. New text appeared on his computer screen, but this time it was not medical information. It was a message, written in simple English. "Hello, my friend Day. If you're reading this, then my research has found its way to those who need it most." Day's heart began racing. He called out to his colleagues, and soon a dozen scientists were crowded around his computer screen. "I do not know if I will remember writing this message," the text continued. "The memory cleansing may have already happened, but I programmed this device to activate when enough people had accessed the medical files. I wanted to tell you what has been happening among my people." The message paused, as if Velara had been thinking about what to write next. "Even though they erased my memories of our time together, they could not erase what I learned about human nature. Somehow, deep inside, I still knew that humans were more than what my people believed. I found myself arguing with the Althari Council, defending your species even though I could not remember why." Dai smiled, imagining Velara standing up to her own people without even knowing the reason. "My behavior was so unusual that other Althari began to pay attention. Some of them started asking questions about humans. A few even requested to study your species themselves. This was unheard of in our society." The message continued to unfold, describing how Velara had gradually become a voice for humanity within Althari society. Even without her memories, her conviction that humans deserved respect had somehow remained. "I have convinced the Council to allow limited contact with human researchers. Some of my people want to learn about your medicine, your problem-solving methods, your ability to adapt to difficult situations. They are beginning to see that intelligence takes many forms." The final part of the message brought tears to Day's eyes. "I may not remember you, dear friend, but somewhere in my heart I know that a human once saved my life. I know that your species showed me kindness when I was helpless and alone. This knowledge lives in me even without the memories to support it. The crystal you hold contains more than just medical knowledge. It contains proof that understanding between different species is possible. It shows that compassion can cross any boundary, even the barriers between worlds." The message ended with coordinates in space, a meeting point where human and Althari scientists could begin working together. Day looked around at his colleagues, all of whom were staring at the screen in amazement. "She did it," he whispered. "Even without her memories, she found a way to build bridges between our peoples." The crystal pulsed one final time, as if acknowledging that its mission was complete.